Okay, we're going to get started. So I'm here to talk to you guys about SnifAir, an open source framework for wireless security assessments. So briefly, my name is Matthew Adelberg. I'm a consultant in Optiv's Attack at Penn team. Stephen Derricotte unfortunately could not be here, but he's here in spirit. He is also a consultant in Optiv's Attack and Penn team. We worked on this tool for the past little while together on that. So before we talk about SnifAir, let's talk a little bit about wireless pen testing. So what do we look for? So before we begin and jump into the exploitation, the fun stuff, we need to first just get the lay of the land. So what does that involve? That first requires us to fingerprint the access points, APs, discover what authentication encryption that they might use. This also allows us to identify any rogues that might be unintentional or maliciously placed in an environment. We also will then look at the traffic between clients and access points to see if there's any misconfigurations or insecure connections that we can exploit. Once we have all this, we can then begin to develop a comprehensive attack. So how do we get all this information? We can get it one of two ways. We can do it passively by sniffing and seeing what traffic is out there, or we can do it actively by forcing clients to be disconnected by sending DOF packets, causing them to restart the whole communication authentication process. So the first set of packets that we look at are called beacon frames. Beacon frames are sent out by access points, basically announcing their presence to everything in the area. These packets often contain the MAC address, which is the physical address of the device, the SSID, which is the name of the wireless network they're associated with, as well as information pertaining to the encryption, the channel they sit on, and the authentication methods. We then look at probes. There are two types of probes. Probe requests, and these are sent by the client devices looking for access points that they've previously connected to. So it'll be like, hey, is X in this area? Is Y in this area? These packets will look for and contain what we care about is the SSID of all the client networks that they've previously connected to, as well as their address, their MAC address. If they do not get a response, they move to the next channel and repeat the process. There are tons of these types of hello, is anyone out there packets. The next ones are probe response. These are sent by access points once they receive a probe request that contains the name of the network that they're associated with. Now, these packets are sent directly to the client, but they're also sent out to everyone. But they have the destination of the client, the SSID of the name, and all that other information about encryption, channel, and authentication types. And these packets are especially important when you're looking for hidden SSIDs. The last set is the authentication protocol, EAP. So this protocol, as I mentioned, handles the authentication for wireless. There's multiple different types of authentication EAPs, but most commonly the method is used by using a radius server to handle authentication instead of the access point itself. The access point acts as authenticator where it passes the credentials to the radius server, and that radius server processes the credentials. Now these can be credentials, like I mentioned, a pre-shared key, or even a cert. Based on the success or fail of response, the access point will then allow or deny access to the rest of the network for that client. So looking at a common tool, this is an output of AeroDump. You can see the client's MAC address, the power. So what power denotes is how close you are. So the lower the value, the closer you are. And this helps determine which access points are in your area or might be 2 blocks down or in a building across the street. The channel, as I mentioned, there can be multiple different channels that an access point can sit on. The encryption, the cipher being used, what type of authentication type, the names of the SSID associated with it. They're also sometimes called ESSID depending on the tool. Below you can see the names of the SSIDs probed, as well as the address, and if they were connected. So if you look at this, it can be kind of convoluted as it will be very hard to read. Oftentimes when you get a large sample, this will run right off the screen and you won't be able to see that bottom piece. As well, as we were building this tool, we discovered a lot of tools will discover automatically hidden networks, but they won't tell you that they're hidden. They'll just show you the name. There's no recording or a log or evidence of that, which makes it hard when you go and you do further analysis, or if you're looking to see if they're hidden networks. Oftentimes, hidden networks force clients to send out more packets and probes announcing the presence of this access point, which can lead to some serious attacks. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. So, oftentimes, these are the common attacks attackers will use on wireless networks. These are not all of them, but these are the most common ones that we see and we look for. Now, when we get to how a network is set up, a wireless network, we often get posed with these three. These are the three most common we see clients use. Some sort of captive portal. This is oftentimes used on a guest network. So if you have vendors or anyone coming into your building, you have maybe BYOD devices. So this portal could be a set of credentials that are maybe shared each day. They change. They're centralized to each department. They might be just one for the company, or they might even be using Active Directory credentials. So there are many different types of attacks we can use against them, and we will go into further detail. The second one is WPA2 or WPA pre-shared keys. So that was traditionally designed as an implementation for home networks, where one password, there's no username, it's a phrase, and using a cryptographic method, you encrypt it, the access point has to recreate the same thing. If they are both the same, you're allowed access. Most of the time, though, for the main corporate networks, we see a lot of clients using 802.1x. And there are different types of methods. As you can see, we oftentimes see EAP-Fast, which is being more adopted by Cisco using EAP chaining, where multiple types of authentications are being used. So it could be an EAP protocol and then maybe a Cisco VPN session that's pre-configured to automatically connect as a secondary. And they work in tandem. The second one is PEEP, which is protected EAP. Now, with protected EAP, there usually is a tunnel, a cryptographic tunnel to ensure that passwords are sent in a secure manner. EAP TLS does not use credentials at all. It uses certs. There are no credentials passed. And EAP TTLS is a combination of PEEP and EAP TLS, where both cert is used as well as authentication credentials. So what is SNIFAir? SNIFAir is an open source security wireless framework that we developed. Its primary purpose is to collect and manage and allow for the analyzation of large amounts of wireless traffic. So how does it work? You can either feed it data in real time using a live capture like AeroDump, or you can feed it offline captures that you previously have done. And what it does is, using our complex, comprehensive fingerprinting engine, we break down each packet into 4 types: access point, probe request, probe response, and enterprise packets. Once we've broken them down, we pull out the important information, like I discussed prior, from each packet, storing them in a database. Now, as I mentioned, there can be numerous amounts of the same types of packets, so we only care about the unique ones. And this also lends itself, as sometimes an access point can be broadcasting a certain set of authentication type, but actually support a second type, maybe as a failover or a misconfiguration. So I think I've talked enough about it, so let me just show you it. Sure. Pardon, I can't. So, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the term. So when we do multiple ones, they're fed in with a separate command, so you actually feed it a list, and that list will then ensure that there's no duplicates. That answers your question. Yeah. So we'll load up a workspace. You can create or load one and then feed it data. In this case, because it does take some time, I already created one. Sure. One sec. Is that better? So once you've loaded up data, or if you have a loaded workspace that has data in it, you'll see a little HUD display of what the top SSIDs. If you have, which I'll discuss further, in scope, where you can specify certain ones that you want to focus on specifically, we'll also give you a little dashboard of those as well. So first table I want to show you is our access point table. So right now you can kind of see how this is laid out. You'll notice at the top I did put a little note that this is a demo mode. That's just because, as you can see, there are over 270 rows, so that can go right off your screen. I wanted to show you how this looks. So you can see the ESSID, SSID of the access point that's broadcasting, the MAC address, the vendor of the actual device, so who created that access point, which channel it's sitting on, the power, which I discussed about how is the range of how close you are. We record the closest recorded value that you guys have. As there could be numerous ones as you step away, it might get farther and farther, so wherever it is closest at that time in that PCAP file or live capture, it records that one, as well as the encryption, the cipher, and the authentication type. So the next table I'm going to show you is the probe request. So like I mentioned before, what we care about are the SSID names, the client, and the client that is sending them out. But we also provide you which vendor created it, and these can help elevate when you're doing MAC spoofing or even captive portal bypassing. So this table is a probe response. These are all the probe responses that were recorded. And you can see the name of the SSID, the access point's MAC address, the vendor, the channel again, power, encryption, but you can also see which client it was sent to. Now these packets are sent out to everyone, but there's oftentimes a destination client. So you can now correlate between what client requested what name, wireless name, and did an access point respond with the proper information. So this is the enterprise EAP table. And why we look at this is because there's a systemic flaw with the protocol in that when credentials are sent, the username is sent before the tunnel is created, so they are sent in clear text. So that's something that we can use to our advantage as attackers to see and perform other attacks with. You can see the source as well as the username and which access point it went to. We also allow you the ability to look for things like show me all the SSIDs across all tables. And that's done by just simply saying show SSIDs. And that will give you a list of every single SSID recorded in both the access point table, the probe request, and the probe response. You can do that for vendor, encryption, authentication types. So as I mentioned, we also included what's called an in-scope field, in which you can take an SSID and set it as your in-scope. So those are the ones you want to focus on. Maybe you have a bunch that are out of scope and you don't want to see all the erroneous data for other ones. You just want to focus on the ones that you're here to test and assess. So you can do that by doing in-scope. Let's do, and you can do multiple ones. So let's do, and then if you want to see all the information about these in-scope ones, you can just use the SSID info command. And you can see all the access points address, all the vendors, the channels, and the type of encryption associated with each in-scope SSID. Now, I mentioned before about the usefulness about hidden SSIDs. So we also have modules for both assessing and exploitation. So one of them is the hidden SSID module. And what we do with that is we actually look at the passive data that was sent out and compare it. So we look at what access points came up as hidden. Did a client probe for an SSID, and did those hidden access points respond with a name? If there is a match, we record and change that value for you. So you can see how many of these that we discovered. Now, once this is done, it actually records and updates the access point table to show you that these are no longer recorded as hidden. You can also view all the hidden SSIDs by using the show table hidden SSID. Now, we're always looking for new ideas and other modules, but we also came up with the ability to make your own queries. So using SQL syntax, you can actually request data in a certain way depending on the syntax that you perform. So to give you an example, let's go from that did not work. Let's type it out manually. And you can see, using a custom query, we can now see a hidden SSID that was previously hidden. We can now see in the access point table that it's been updated to show the proper name. So, sorry. So what we've done is we've actually recorded some of the attacks that are currently in SNIFAir. There's going to be a few more that we will be implementing over the time, but we wanted to kind of demonstrate some of these attacks. So this is the first one, which we call auto-eep, which does eep brute forcing. So based off the information that we have in the eep table, you can perform password guessing much like we do in common for networks and like web applications. We can do the same thing for enterprise networks based off the information. So you can see we have 5 access points. And in the eep table, we have a series of usernames. And if we look at the BSSID, we can see that it matches one of our access points. So then we can use the module auto-eep. But we have to first set up, much like with any attack, we have to set up the parameters and variables. So the first thing we have to do is obviously the interface that we're going to be broadcasting from. Then the next is the name of the SSID that we're going to be targeting, followed by the type of encryption. So we know from our investigations that this is an EAP-based PEEP network. And then the password that we're going to use. Now, you can also use the usernames that are found in SNIFAir that you've captured, but you can also specify a word list using the username file field. And if you do some more OSINT stuff, you can also load it into SNIFAir so that you can do it for subsequent attacks. So you can see we have our password and everything ready to go. So we're going to launch it. So on the right-hand side, you can see this is the Radius server and processing all these requests. So you can see the first one just came through. It was Alice with summer 2017. So that was successful. So we received a success. Now, SNIFAir uses a modified WPA supplicant to handle all these requests. And it looks for responses from the access point saying that the Radius communication for EAP, in this case it's EAP-PEEP, it has been successful, and it looks for ones that say failure to determine if the password is valid. Once you've finished any attack, you can then check the results using our loot table, and you will see the results stored there, only the successful ones. So another attack we have, I mentioned about captive portals. So in this attack, We set up, using a predefined template, we set up an access point that uses a captive portal authentication. So what's great with this type of attack and how we constructed this is that with wireless, especially mobile devices and some Windows and OS X, depending on the version, once they connect, they are instantly prompted with a window to log in, making it look like it's been loaded by, say, Cisco, or excuse me, or by something else. So in the actual configuration, they're never prompted to have to go load up a web page manually. It's presented to them in a nice, neat fashion. It takes the convenience of having to try to struggle figuring it out. This also allows people that are broadcasting for a certain open network that has a captive portal to perform an attack called Karma, where they just respond saying, yes, I'm this network, connect to me, let's load it up, and they're instantly presented. So with this, people can be walking by your probe, and they'll instantly connect, and if they enter in their credentials, you've managed to phish them. So like I stated before, we have to set up some variables. So here we set up the interface, the name of the SSID, the channel, and then we run this attack. So it loads up an access, basically a fake access point. It sets up the DNS routes and records, as well as it loads up a web server to host your page. Now currently we only have a template for Cisco, but we are also adding ones for Outlook, webmail, and other ones. We're always looking for ideas, so if you guys have any, of course. So this is how it would look from an Android phone's perspective. They click connect, checking. They're instantly presented with a Cisco page. They enter their credentials in. You can see the credentials there, as well as once you're finished, you can then see them in the table, the loot table as well. So to recap, Snifair allows you to parse large amounts of data, storing them in a database. It performs queries to analyze this traffic, and you have modules to perform further analysis as well as exploitation of wireless networks and clients. We are looking to include more in future releases, specifically focusing on vulnerability assessments for additional analysis, as well as other attacks for pre-shared keys, GTC downgrade attacks, as well as post-exploitation modules looking at wireless segmentation, bypassing, can we see user traffic, can we make queries, that type of stuff. I actually have something, one more thing before I go to questions. Wasn't sure if I had time for another demo, but before I go to that demo, do I have any questions? So typically, anyone that handles packet injection would be good. So there's a TP-Link, I think it's WN722 something, as well as a lot of the alpha cards. I'm sorry, I can't hear. Which one was it? Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Like I still use the old one from a couple of years ago, so that must have been a recent change. Yes. While you're running a sniff, like you're sniffing? Yeah, you can. So if you want to, so just to confirm, your question is that can I take the attack offline? Yes, there is a backend SQL query. The only time you can access the data is if you're loading in offline PCAPs, as it is a quite intensive process. So what will happen is you'll see lots of duplicates, and then the cleanup process happens. So an ID may change, so it does get a little convoluted. So we do recommend that you just wait until then, but it's still possible. We're using SQLite 3 as our backend with Scapy as a basis for our engine. Yes, so we do have a module. It's one of the ones that we recently added, which allows you to export all the data in all the tables, including the loop table. It's okay, it's okay. Pardon? Yeah, so actually with Wireshark, there's actually a library that's put on all distros when you install it. Yeah. Yes, so what we're actually going to be doing is releasing a template to allow you to make your own modules as well as your own web templates. We're really pushing the open source community on this. We have great ideas, but I bet you anything, there are people, if we had a nice conversation, you would give me 1,000 new ideas to implement. Yes. Yes. So that's something that we are looking at implementing, but it's one of those things where it'll take us a lot of time to kind of adjust the code, but it is possible, and we do have some stuff. It's just right now not displayed in our demo. So you can actually then perform further, like a PostX, where you can sniff and man in the middle of the traffic, or SSL strip out the traffic to see the clear text communications. So the tool's on GitHub right now. Everything is live, and we're going to be incrementing. So if you follow us on Twitter, you'll see a little note from us saying, hey, we just released this. Hey, we just modified this. So those are the best ways to look at it. Look at our GitHub or follow us on Twitter to get updates. It's okay. Just one more, though. Yes. So it actually will report all of them because when I said a little briefly at the beginning about unique strings, so it makes sure if each field is unique, like the same with the exception of the power, it will not record it. So if any of those fields change, even the authentication type, it will be logged. Do anyone have any more questions? So I have one last thing. I wasn't sure if I was going to get to it based on time, but let's do a live demo. So this is an evil twin attack where we stand up a fake malicious access point, making it look like it's a legit one. So I just spun this up, and if you guys want, if you guys feel, you guys can connect, and you guys will see the MS Chat v2 handshake that we can then crack. We will be able to see the usernames in clear text, so keep that in mind when you guys are writing things in. Yes, please keep it PG. Yes. Uh-oh, there we go. So you can see right here, we are getting usernames and the hashes for several of them. Now, we also are looking at implementing Loot Booty's GTC downgrade, so that way we can turn these hashes into clear text credentials. That is something that we're going to be pushing out in the next few months. But you can perform an MS Chat v2, where you can then take these to OCL Hashcat and crack them. Oh, it looks like someone tried authenticating with bad SSL cert. Do I have any other questions? Not a lot. I'm not willing to admit that. Anyway. Well, thank you guys.